I'm smelling coffee, birds are singing just outside. Here comes your mercy, streaming in with the morning light. My heart's racing, waking up to your smile. Say good morning. Say good morning.
All right, so good morning. Happy Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. It is Breakfast with the Bible, and we're on Psalm 13. So without further ado, I will start. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long shall mine enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Lighten mine eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest mine enemies say, I have prevailed against him, and those that trouble me rejoice when I am moved. But I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing unto the Lord, because he hath dealt bountifully with me. So this is another Psalm of David. We aren't really certain of the situation, but I bet most of us can relate to his opening statements. So, as if God is slow to respond. Maybe we feel as if he isn't listening. Again, we've kind of covered this topic in the previous few Psalms, where this idea that we kind of feel like God is far from us, God isn't paying attention. And David's in despair at this moment. So, we would be lying if we said we never grow weary or impatient, waiting on God to move on our behalf. We'll say a prayer, Lord, get me out of this situation. Get me out of this trouble. Where are you? And our flesh, our nature says, God, why aren't you doing something? And sometimes we get in trouble when we say those things, because we end up going, okay, well, if God's not going to do anything now, then I'm going to take care of it. And then, I think a lot of us can realize and can understand and recall situations where we decided to do our own thing and say, well, God's not going to move, then I'll handle it, and then we end up making it worse, and then God has to intervene and discipline us. So we can and do grow weary in waiting. It's not uncommon, it's not unnatural. God and his word says that we have the power not to grow weary. We are commanded to not grow weary in waiting. We are instructed to have peace in the waiting, but nonetheless, we still respond, in those situations differently than God would desire. Spurgeon says, if the reader has never yet found occasion to use the language of this brief ode, he will do so before long, if he be a man after the Lord's own heart. So really what Spurgeon is saying is that even the man of God will find himself in this situation. He will find himself in a season of despair, if you will. And the language of this psalm says, David is describing his heavy heart. He's describing his desperation for God to move, his almost depression once again in this moment. Again, we don't exactly know what happened during the writing of this psalm, but it's clear to say that David is definitely overwhelmed or burdened by whatever's happening, and he's crying out to the Lord. Why haven't you moved? Why haven't you done something? One thing I want to grab a hold of real quick is, if we move through David's Psalms, is that David is indeed called a man after God's own heart. And we often think that kind of phrase is reserved for someone who does everything right, someone who never doubts or never grows weary. But what we learn from David in the Psalms is that, as his life in the other books, is that he was a real man with real issues, real fears, real emotions, and real struggles. Most of, if not all of us, can relate to at least one of his writings. And never think that you are not qualified to be a man or woman after God's own heart, because you're unqualification is exactly what qualifies you. This acknowledgement that I am not in myself qualified to be a man or a woman after God's own heart is exactly the humility that God desires in someone he would refer to that way. David repeats this heart-wrenching question 4 times in 2 verses. How long? As I like to say, redundance creates emphasis. He says, how long? He means it. This is a deep, heartfelt question that David has. How long, Lord? When will you show up? When will you move on my behalf? I have trusted you. I have put my faith in you. When will you do something? And this is not a sinful question. This is a real question from a real person who has real emotions, and our emotions are real. Okay, as I said before, while emotions are real, we need to trust Christ and trust God in the action with those emotions. We don't let those emotions drive our decisions. So David is pushing this weight that he has. David is overwhelmed, and he's under this pressure, feeling like God hasn't really any desire to do anything. And he's anxious, he's impatient. And again, this is not calling out a sin that David is doing. This is not calling out David's distrust in the Lord, but it's a real question from a real heart. And we sometimes as believers we feel ashamed in doubting or in questioning God's motives or questioning God's timing. God isn't surprised by our thought processes and our concerns even in those kinds of times. The only thing God asks us to do is trust. He's not telling us we can't question. We can't say, I don't know. I'm not sure. God knows that we're not infinite. We don't know everything. So to question and to not be sure is natural, is something that he would expect from us. But I think the important thing is we direct our questions to God. We don't ask somebody else, why is it taking so long? Well, they don't have the answer either. And if they're wise counsel, they would say, well, because God's not ready yet. And as long as we continue our trust in God, and it may not always be 100%, there's still going to be this, it doesn't mean that David didn't trust him. David still trusted God because he was willing to ask the question to God, how long? Which means he knew God would move. He knew God would respond and would act according to God's character. But David's question was, why haven't you moved yet? It's not David saying, I don't believe you're going to do anything. David is just saying, okay, in my trust, I know you will move, but I'm uncertain as to when. And I desire it to be soon. I'm overwhelmed. This burden, this weight, this struggle, whatever it was, is too much for me. I need you to move soon. And again, this is David responding in trust. I do trust you, Lord. I know you'll act. I know you'll move. I know you are faithful. But my question to you is, when? And this is a natural question, like I said. Verses 3 and 4 say, consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Lighten mine eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest mine enemies say, I have prevailed against him, and those that trouble me rejoice when I am moved. It expresses the level of David's despair. He cries, enlighten mine eyes, Lord. Show me a sign of hope. Give me something I can cling to. David knew he wasn't seeing clearly. David knew enough to cry out for God to show him. And David is aware of his own heart, his own disparity. Another thing is the transition from verse 1 to 3 is super powerful. Yet I'm willing to bet we miss this a lot of times. David is feeling God is not listening. Yet verse 3 shows David's determination to continue to cry. Verse 1 says, How long wilt thou forget me? There it is. Verse 3, consider and hear me. David continues to pour out his heart, even though, according to verse 1, he feels like God isn't listening. God often waits until we're desperate. When we are certain we lack the power, that's when God's power shows up. When we know and we acknowledge there is absolutely nothing I can do without God moving. That's when God shows up. That's when God says, okay, now you're ready. David refuses to give up. Now, remember what Paul said in Ephesians chapter 1, and I'll turn there real quick. Chapter 1, verses 17 to 19. It says, let me get there real quick. Chapter 1, Ephesians. Sometimes these pages are super thin. 17 to 19 says, that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, may give unto you the spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him. The eyes of your understanding be enlightened, that you may know what is the hope of his calling, and what the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints, and what is the exceeding greatness of his power to usward who believe, according to the working of his mighty power. The God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, may give to you the spirit of wisdom. David knew that losing to his enemy would only make them boast more. Because of this, David was determined to hold fast. If David gave up, if David said, fine, whatever, he knew that it would give God the wrong image, and the enemies would just say, we did it. I knew we could do it. And then it would just increase their boasting. Verses 5 and 6 says, but I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing unto the Lord, because he hath dealt bountifully with me. This is David's declaration. The key word here is but. But I have trusted. But my heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. But I will sing unto the Lord, because he hath dealt bountifully with me. I have, I shall, I will. Makes me think of Philippians 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. Because in the Lord there is always something to rejoice about. Even in disparity, David was determined. I have trusted. I shall rejoice, and I will sing. This is but even though I feel this way, even though this is what it seems like, I will rejoice. I will sing. I have trusted. David is making a commitment. Doesn't matter what's going on. This is where emotions and decisions come together. Okay? These are David's emotions. How long, O Lord, will you forget me? Okay, David's emotion. I feel like you're not listening. I feel like I'm alone. I feel like you don't care. That's my emotion. But my decision, I have trusted. I shall rejoice, and I will sing. This is in spite of how I feel. What I know is God is faithful. What I know is God will deliver me. So because of what I know, not what I feel, I have trusted. I shall rejoice, and I will sing. If we can grasp that one thing, decisions and emotions, what I know and what I feel. What I feel is real, but not always true. So I take what I feel and I compare it to what I know, and I say, okay, I know God is not a God who forgets. God is not a God who hides from me. So, even though I feel this way, I know I can trust him. I know I can rejoice, and I will sing because of it. Okay, this is my decision to act according to what I know, not according to how I feel. It's not that a man after God's own heart is never in despair. It's that even when he is in despair, even when he feels this way, he is determined to trust God. I thank you for watching. I hope this challenged you to trust him, even though you don't feel like he's listening. Again, David's devotion. He continued to cry out even though he felt like God wasn't paying attention. He didn't give up just because I really feel like you're not there. But I will continue to call out to you because I know who you are. I know you pay attention. So my prayer today is that you will take what you know and act according to it. What you know about God, and you move on it, and you do something with it. As opposed to what you feel like God is doing, what you feel like whether or not he is there, you compare it to what you know about God and make your decision based on that and not your feelings. Again, feelings are real, but not always true. God is always real and always true. One definitely weighs more than the other. So again, thank you for watching. Subscribe, share, thumbs up, do all that other stuff. And we'll see you back tomorrow. God bless.